Welcome back to the Stephen A. Smith Show. Before I get on out of here, I had to talk about a story that's very, very important. And albeit indirectly, it involves Caitlin Clark.
The basketball world's biggest star may have gone quiet, but the noise surrounding her has only grown louder. This is no longer just a debate about a roster decision. What we are witnessing looks far bigger than a simple snub. To many observers, it feels like the destruction of one of the greatest marketing opportunities sports has ever seen. And according to one of the loudest voices in sports media, the damage could be lasting. The Wnba establishment continues to avoid confronting a narrative that Stephen A. Smith has now pushed into the spotlight. This is no longer just about Caitlin Clark being left out. It is about the growing belief that she has stopped believing in a system that never truly embraced her from the beginning. For months, fans were told that basketball reasons explained everything. They were told it was about experience, chemistry, and earning respect over time. But once you look beyond the polished statements and carefully crafted talking points, a different picture begins to emerge. Many see a story filled with resentment, gatekeeping, and jealousy that has turned the sport into a battleground. Before we continue, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this content. Surprisingly, more than 83% of viewers still haven't subscribed. It costs nothing, takes only a moment, and helps the channel tremendously. Have you subscribed yet? If so, thank you for the support. Now let's get back to the story. Stephen A. Smith did more than criticize the decision. He argued that the real issue runs much deeper. According to him, Clark understands exactly what is happening, and the attention directed at her has everything to do with her importance rather than any lack of talent. Rumors that are spreading rapidly now suggest that even if the Indiana Fever attempted to repair the relationship, Clark may already have moved on. Reports claim she is no longer seeking acceptance from people who, in the eyes of many supporters, have spent months challenging her both physically and mentally. Why would one of America's most popular athletes consider stepping away from the international stage? What did Stephen A. Smith notice that others failed to see? And has women's basketball reached the moment where its biggest opportunity is being pushed away? The story surrounding Caitlin Clark's basketball future shines a light on a side of professional sports that many people would rather ignore. To understand why this controversy exploded, we need to return to the moment the news first surfaced. What should have been a routine roster announcement quickly became something much larger. These lists are released every year, and most are forgotten within days. Fans complain, debates happen, and the sports world moves on. This situation was completely different. It became a cultural shockwave. As reports began circulating, Caitlin Clark, the player who had been filling arenas and attracting unprecedented attention to the league, was suddenly at the center of a controversy that nobody could ignore. Confusion was not the only reaction. It quickly turned into outrage. The official explanation provided by the selection committee felt weak to many observers. They pointed to experience. They pointed to the commitment required to become part of the established group. On the surface, the reasoning sounded logical, but it ignored what was happening in reality. If Michael Jordan were a rookie, you would not leave him off the team. If Tiger Woods was transforming a sport, you would not keep him on the sidelines because he had not earned enough seniority. The biggest stars belong on the biggest stage. That is where the story takes a darker turn. Reports from people familiar with the process began suggesting that this was not simply an oversight. It was a statement. Sources claimed there were concerns about how veteran players would react to Caitlin Clark's presence. There were worries about the attention and media frenzy that would follow her. In other words, some feared that a rookie superstar could overshadow established legends who viewed the team as their own. This was not strictly a basketball decision. It was about managing personalities and emotions. The comfort of veteran players appeared to take priority over the growth of the sport itself. That is exactly where Stephen A. Smith drew his line. But his comments went far beyond questioning the committee's judgment. He suggested something much more serious. He implied that the decision bordered on sabotage. Stephen A. Smith is known for strong opinions and sharp criticism, but his reaction to Clark's exclusion felt different. It sounded personal. On national television, he essentially labeled the decision foolish. Yet he did more than criticize. He broke down the situation in a way that highlighted what he viewed as a complete failure of vision. His argument was simple. Basketball is a global event. Every 4 years, millions of casual fans tune in to watch sports they normally would not follow. Women's basketball has spent years fighting for greater attention. Then suddenly a player arrives who attracts millions of viewers and creates unprecedented interest. Leaving out the very player who inspires casual fans to schedule their evenings around Indiana Fever games made no sense to him. Smith argued that the move represented a massive marketing mistake. He stressed that winning games was not the only objective. The team was already expected to succeed regardless of the final roster. Their advantage over much of the competition was so significant that they would likely remain favorites no matter who was selected. According to Smith, the real goal should have been expanding the sport's reach, attracting new audiences, and continuing to grow the brand on the largest stage possible. Smith argued that by leaving Clark out, the sport's decision-makers showed that protecting their internal hierarchy mattered more to them than maximizing the game's growth. In his view, the choice reflected a level of poor judgment that is difficult to explain without questioning the motives behind it. They did not simply miss an opportunity. They actively passed one up. Smith also suggested that Clark is unlikely to forget what many see as a public sign of disrespect. He hinted that those around Clark are paying attention to every person who stayed silent throughout the controversy, and that some relationships may already be beyond repair. To fully understand why Caitlin Clark was not included, many observers believe an uncomfortable topic has to be addressed: jealousy. It is a narrative the WNBA would rather avoid. Yet for many people it remains the explanation that best fits the circumstances. Long before Clark played a single professional minute, criticism was already appearing. Warnings and skeptical comments were coming from some of the sport's most respected figures. Diana Taurasi, one of the greatest players ever, famously remarked that reality was coming for Clark. To some, it sounded like a challenge. To others, it felt like a warning. Then there were comments from another legend, Cheryl Swoops, who questioned Clark's college accomplishments and made claims about the circumstances behind her success. Critics wondered why established icons seemed so focused on diminishing the achievements of a 22-year-old before her professional career had even begun. A theory that Stephen A. Smith has repeatedly alluded to is that some members of the old guard are uncomfortable with the extraordinary attention Clark receives. Many of those veterans played in front of sparse crowds. They traveled under far different conditions and spent years building the league with far fewer financial rewards or public recognition. Now a young player from Iowa arrives with sold-out arenas, major endorsement deals, and unprecedented media attention before even completing her first season. Jealousy is a human emotion, but throughout sports history veterans have often embraced newcomers who expand the popularity of the game. When Tiger Woods transformed golf, many players benefited from the larger audiences and increased prize money that followed. Yet in the eyes of some fans, the reaction toward Clark has felt very different. Rather than celebrating the attention she brings, critics argue that some people seem determined to punish her for it. That perception has fueled speculation that Clark may not be entirely disappointed about being kept away from an environment many view as increasingly toxic. The tension did not remain limited to interviews and press conferences. It appeared to carry over onto the court. At that point, the discussion shifted from controversy to concerns about player safety. Anyone who has closely followed the games has noticed that Clark often receives a level of physical treatment that sparks debate. This is not simply a conversation about aggressive defense. Critics point to incidents they believe go beyond normal basketball competition. One frequently discussed example involved Alyssa Thomas, where a collision with Clark became a major talking point and generated widespread discussion across sports media and social platforms. After a highly publicized confrontation involving Caitlin Clark, the debate around how she was being treated intensified. Many fans viewed the play as unnecessary and overly physical. What drew even more attention, however, was the reaction that followed. Critics questioned whether the league had responded strongly enough and whether prominent voices around the sport had done enough to defend Clark. Instead, some players and commentators described the incident as part of the adjustment process for a rookie, using phrases such as "welcome to the league" and suggesting she simply needed to become tougher. Stephen A. Smith pointed to what he believed was a glaring double standard. He argued that if a superstar like LeBron James or Stephen Curry were repeatedly subjected to similar treatment, the league would move quickly to protect one of its biggest attractions. With Clark, many observers felt the response was noticeably different. This controversy extends far beyond individual games. It raises questions about trust, chemistry, and relationships within the sport. Why would Clark be eager to spend weeks competing alongside players whom many fans believe have either contributed to the hostility surrounding her or remained silent while it happened? For some supporters, the trust required to build a successful team environment simply no longer exists. That brings us to one of the most talked about rumors surrounding the situation. Following the roster announcement, speculation emerged that Clark could still receive an alternative role connected to the team. The idea was that she would remain available as a replacement if circumstances changed. On paper, it seemed like a compromise, a way of saying that she was still valued without giving her a guaranteed place. But reports from people close to the situation suggested that Clark had little interest in accepting a backup role. According to those rumors, she believed that if she was not considered worthy of a roster spot from the beginning, waiting for an opening was not something she wanted to pursue. There was no dramatic public response, no emotional press conference, no visible outburst. Instead, she appeared to step away quietly and focus on other priorities. Recent comments from Stephen A. Smith have fueled this interpretation. He suggested that Clark fully understands the influence she now holds within the sport. Her personal brand has become one of the most powerful forces in women's basketball, and many believe she no longer needs outside validation to continue growing her popularity. Smith's broader argument was that organizations benefit enormously from Clark's presence, perhaps even more than she benefits from them. From that perspective, declining a secondary role could be viewed as a statement of confidence rather than frustration. Some insiders expected her to accept whatever opportunity was offered. Instead, she appeared comfortable taking time away, while others dealt with the consequences of the controversy. The reason this debate continues to generate so much attention is simple. The numbers are impossible to ignore. The so-called Clark effect has become one of the most discussed topics in sports business. Games featuring Caitlin Clark have consistently delivered television audiences far beyond what the league had grown accustomed to in previous years. Reports have repeatedly shown dramatic increases in ratings and engagement whenever she takes the floor, with viewership often reaching levels several times higher than comparable games without her participation. Those figures have become central to the argument that her impact extends far beyond basketball itself and into the future growth of the sport. Whenever Clark takes the court, arenas fill up. In many cities, teams have moved games to larger NBA venues simply to handle the demand created by her appearance. Her impact on attendance has been impossible to ignore. She has become, in many ways, the league's most powerful economic driver. Stephen A. Smith emphasized this point repeatedly. Modern basketball is heavily dependent on television audiences, sponsorships, and media rights. Broadcasters invest millions of dollars because they expect viewers. From that perspective, Smith argued that leaving Clark at home was not merely a roster decision. It was a financial mistake. What makes the situation unusual is that Clark does not need to respond publicly. She does not have to criticize anyone or engage in controversy. According to this argument, she only needs to remain absent. If television audiences decline compared with what many regular-season Indiana Fever games have produced, the numbers themselves will become the loudest response. The ratings will tell the story. Millions of viewers who might have tuned in could simply choose to spend their time elsewhere. That reality transforms the discussion from a sports debate into a business one. This is not only about basketball performance. It is also about revenue, exposure, and growth. And in professional sports, financial consequences often carry more weight than anything that happens on the court. Beyond the business concerns lies a larger cultural debate. A growing number of fans argue that the WNBA has developed an environment that feels overly exclusive. Critics describe it as a tightly connected circle where acceptance must be earned through a difficult initiation process. For years, the league operated as a relatively small community. Players knew one another well, competed overseas during the off-season, and shared many of the same experiences and struggles. Clark represents something different. She represents a new generation of attention, a wave of casual fans, and a much broader audience. Some observers believe that tension has emerged because many longtime supporters are uncomfortable with how quickly those new fans have arrived. The disagreement is easy to spot online. Traditional WNBA followers often express frustration that so much attention is focused on Clark rather than the league as a whole. Their argument is understandable. They want recognition for the players who spent years building the sport. However, critics say the response has too often come across as hostile toward newcomers rather than welcoming. Stephen A. Smith has argued that this approach is dangerous for any growing sports league. New fans should be encouraged to participate, not tested to prove their loyalty before being accepted. According to that viewpoint, the decision involving Clark reinforced an unhealthy us versus them mentality. To many people, it signaled that protecting a small, established circle was more important than embracing a larger audience and expanding the game's reach. Whether that perception is fair or not, it has become a major part of the ongoing conversation surrounding the league and its future. Throughout the controversy, Clark has remained remarkably composed. She consistently praises opponents, spends time with fans, and signs autographs long after games end. She has largely avoided public confrontations and chosen a professional approach at every turn. Ironically, the more restraint she shows, the more critics argue that the league's perceived mean girl image becomes visible. As a result, many neutral observers who once had no strong opinions are beginning to view some of the league's veterans more negatively. Stephen A. Smith has also highlighted another angle to the story, the business side. Caitlin Clark is one of Nike's most recognizable athletes, and Nike has invested heavily in women's basketball. In professional sports, major sponsors often have a vested interest in seeing their biggest stars featured on the largest stages. That naturally raises questions. Why didn't corporate influence change the outcome? Why wasn't more pressure applied behind the scenes? Some reports and rumors suggest that even powerful corporate interests were unable to sway the final decision. Others speculate that sponsors had relationships and commitments across the league and preferred not to disrupt existing dynamics. Whatever the explanation, many observers believe the committee was determined to demonstrate its independence, even if doing so created tension with major business partners. The result was a missed opportunity from a marketing standpoint. Clark's growing brand, combined with Nike's global reach, could have created a massive promotional moment. Instead, what could have been a seamless partnership became another example cited by critics who view the entire process as disorganized and self-defeating. When one of the country's most recognizable athletes and one of the world's largest sports brands fail to capitalize on a major opportunity together, questions are inevitable. At the same time, another layer of the debate has developed online, and it is impossible to ignore. Discussions about race have become intertwined with conversations about Clark's popularity and media coverage. The WNBA is a predominantly black league, while Clark is a white athlete who receives extraordinary attention from national media outlets. Some players, analysts, and fans have argued that race can influence which athletes receive the most coverage and public support. That broader conversation has existed in sports for years and remains a legitimate topic of discussion. However, many people believe it has become increasingly polarized in Clark's case. Certain rivalries, including the well-publicized competition between Clark and Angel Reese that dates back to their college careers, have become symbols of larger debates taking place among fans. Social media discussions often split into opposing camps, with every on-court incident quickly turning into a much broader cultural argument. Stephen A. Smith has approached this aspect of the story carefully. While acknowledging the historical context and complexity surrounding race in sports, he has repeatedly argued that Clark's popularity cannot be explained by race alone. In his view, her appeal is rooted in the style of basketball she plays, her ability to attract casual viewers, her long-range shooting, her playmaking, and the excitement she generates whenever she steps on the court. Whether people agree or disagree, Smith's position is that the numbers, audience growth, and fan engagement point to a phenomenon that extends beyond any single factor.